All right, I'm joined here with Evan Mirzai, our man on the ground, our studio level writer, producer, director, who's been giving us updates about the WGA SAG-AFTRA strikes. Evan, I want to get your reactions to the WGA reaching a deal with the AMPTP, and just your general reactions to that, some high points from that, and yeah, just how you're feeling.
Sure. Well, for the moment, we're calling it a tentative deal because there are still regulations and customs we have to go through as a guild to ratify the deal. Technically, the guild body itself will vote to ratify between October 2nd and 9th, a week-long voting term. But overall, reactions to the deal vary based on how well you understand contracts, but they don't vary too far from the baseline that this is the greatest deal negotiated by a labor union in Hollywood in its history as an industry. And we couldn't be more proud of our leadership. You know, our president, Meredith Steam, one of our lead negotiators, Chris Kaiser, on the negotiating committee with David Goodman, both former presidents of the union themselves, and our chief negotiator, Ellen Stutzman. This was just top down, as you saw, not just within our guild, but within every sister guild, industry or not. It was our time, our hot labor summer, to put our foot down and get a major deal that was not only right for the times, but a barometer of where we're going to go in the future now that we're trying to make payments match more with the cost of living and more in line with the commensurate with what the work deserves. So we'll dive into it. I don't know if you want me. I think I can do it right now. If you want like the core bullet points, we can do that now, or you can ask me specifics on those. Maybe I should do that
Yeah,
first.
I think core bullet points are good, specifically around the big talking points that people who are paying attention to the strike, I think from the outside, were really looking into. Things around residuals relating to the streaming world, but also whether or not things got settled as regards to AI and artificial intelligence, and whether there's going to be that
Sure.
sort of adversarial relationship between writers and AI and business overall.
Absolutely. And if I get too into the weeds on any one topic, just tell me to wrap it up and we'll move
No,
to
this
the
is
next
Weed
segment
Central,
of the
baby.
deal.
Keep going.
But okay, great. It's almost like a Mr. Rogers segment. So let me just change my sweater and then we'll tell you the ABCs. No. So basically, to begin with, our negotiating committee reached improvements on every single sector of the business. I'm pretty sure that's the first time that's ever happened in the labor negotiation in this industry. So that's improvement for baseline pay, for residuals, for guardrails against AI, for pension, health, and welfare contributions, for writing teams, for single script fees, for staff writers. We'll get into it. But every single, and including comedy variety writers being protected like they've never been protected in the history of, I sound like certain who in the history of.
So I just
Anyway,
want to
so
highlight that for folks. It is y'all negotiated hard. The things you wanted for were, on paper very easy for the AMPTP to put through. But that's what you do. You negotiate hard, and maybe you don't get quite there what you want. But the idea is you negotiate for something really good, so you get something close to really good, or what you're really happy with near the end.
yeah,
And
which is the ideal.
no, I was just gonna say that and there's also, you're saying improvements in things like AI and residuals for streaming. Like the old contracts didn't have those things, and that was the problem. So it really sounds like a modernization of the deal as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I tried to mention a moment ago. We're trying to bring the contract up to reality. So let's just start about the improvements across the board that are just killer. So television, for example, we've created a new rank of television writer, if you will. When you write a television show, when you watch a television show on TV, the opening credits, everybody says, if you're not in Hollywood, oh, look at the 50 producers on that TV show. What many people don't know is that a producer credit, no matter what the level, supervising producer, story editor, staff writer, co-producer, executive producer, these are, I said them all out of order, these are rankings of the television system. So those are the list of writers on a writing staff. So what's happened in the last couple of years is that the number of writers hired to create each show has shrunk as the years and episode orders have gone on and developed, right? So before, it would be common to have 10 or plus writers writing a network show, 15 staff writers, pardon me, any level of the staff, lower, upper, or middle, would be writing a television show. And it's come down to the point now with the creation of what's called mini rooms, where many television rooms were being completed with 3-2 writers. And there are also now solo written shows, like shows by people like Taylor Sheridan, who writes Yellowstone. That's now covered in the deal as well. But basically, we've created an additional rank that goes into the mid-level section, so there's more chance of people, climbing the ladder in the writing room. What happened before to staff writers is that when you're a baby in the writer's room and you're hired to contribute as a member of the group, as you do for however many weeks are required for the show, if you're lucky enough, there comes a time when you are able to write your own script. So everybody pools their ideas, you map out the story together, certain writers are chosen to execute certain episodes, and if you're lucky, you get to write an episode. Until now, what's happened is when you get your contract as a staff writer, you're paid weekly like any other writer. But when any other writer is tasked with writing an episode, they get an additional fee for that episode. Staff writers, although contractually have it, they're not enforced to be paid it. So a writer who's making $5,000 a week writing on a CW network show and then gets to write an episode of the first season of them as a staff writer is now entitled to, I think the ballpark's like $40,000 before the raises. So that's like getting a 25% raise for your first year in the room, and that's something that was always taken for granted. Expanding on that in TV writing as well as feature writing, teams used to be historically paid as one person. So two people would split the fees of one person. The fees are still split. We'll maybe make a change on that sometime in the near future. But right now, every time a writer is paid for their writing, they're also entitled to payments made to their pension, health, and welfare account, or how we retire and how we pay our health insurance. And so now writing teams, even though they're still splitting the fee, are now given equal pension, health, and welfare contributions. Like, for example, my twin brother and I were a writing team when we started in the industry. We wrote together for the first 4 or 5 years of our career, had a lot of sales, but had to split our pension, health, and welfare and fees. And so that's been addressed. But these are the little things. I'm going to go all over the place. But the most important thing I mentioned, if you want to guide me here, but I have an idea.
Yeah, it just seems like it is helping. In addition to, like, one big problem I was hearing on the lines was that it's so hard for people to come up and break into the industry right now. And that's what a lot of writers who had been on the strike lines for the previous writer's strike, at least the first previous one, who had been around at least that long, they wanted to try to preserve that ecosystem and that environment so you could come up easier and actually make it. So again, like, you may be like, you know how Hollywood works. You may not be made it and you're good just because you get written on one show or like one episode does well, but you're not starving or you're straggling. You're not based on these like outdated sort of fees and penalties and ways of thinking about it. So that's what I get kind of out of that. Is it makes it easier for people to break in.
Yeah, to that point, exactly. There are now advancements made in the contract that specifically make it, I'll say, easier for lower level and first time writers to be hired on a television show. And that's crucial in a time when it's still hard for people of color, subjugated people of any kind of sexual orientation to be taken seriously and hired on staff. We now have points that make that, it's, again, I don't want to say easier for a lower level to get their first job, but it has been made less hard with this deal.
It's more like you can get into the room, you can be writing for a big network, and you can, afford to maybe live and pay rent, maybe not right downtown or in the nicest area, but an hour away from work, right? As opposed to having to drive for Uber.
Yeah, let's talk about that too, because I saw the deadline comments and I heard a lot of people, not a lot, but I saw some of the complaints coming were, why are the writers striking? Not to mention, why are actors striking? Why are the United Auto Workers striking? Why did UPS almost come to a strike? Why did the pilots union close a historic deal recently? Yeah, there's just there's this misconception that certain jobs are paid, and look, you might be making $4,000 or $5,000 a week as a new writer on a television show, but that's for 6 weeks worth of work, and many times that's the only 6 weeks a writer can get for the year. And so, to talk about the strike itself, why I said the strike was we were able to last so long, and we could have probably written it much longer, is because the payment practices of the elite and the studio system have trained us to live like cockroaches. So they were taking away, I saw people on Twitter, some of my fellow compatriots were tweeting, these are studio level writers also saying, thank God the strike's over. Now I just get to go back to being unemployed. So it is a kind of a misnomer that, we're all these silver spoon elites out here. That was true. I don't want to say how many years ago there were still people in the guild who were making money hand over fist in the studio system in, the 90s and aughts, what have you. But no, we're not all elite, but we deserve the opportunity to be paid as elite if what we create earns elite money for the buyers.
I think, as you were saying, for all these other different industries that are seeing I don't want to call it worker uprisings, but worker consciousness and solidarity. It's that same.
No, call it that, damn.
Yeah, let's give it the connotation as it is. We love that. But that's what they're all saying, is that they're creating the value.
I mean, look, I'll tell you this way. let me read a lame Instagram post I put up today because language is important when it comes to things like fighting for what you're earned. And so I posted today just a little thank you. Now's the time. I said, organized labor is the only remedy for corporate greed. I'm as energized and steadfast as our entire WJ body, and I'm proud to continue to stand with our sister unions, which we'll talk about, SAG-AFTRA and IATSE, to finish this job for now. Okay, so listen. Congratulations to all writers on the best deal ever negotiated in Hollywood. Thank you to Drew Carey for feeding our army, which he did, and opening up Bob's Big Boys and Swingers on his tab for the entirety of the strike. I say thank you to our board, NEGCOM, and leadership, true labor warriors who will go down in history as champions of their fellow creatives. That's fighting talk. So we got to use it.
You were just in that part mentioning as well how the WGA strike is just part of the battle, especially in Hollywood. You have IATSE and you have SAG-AFTRA. SAG-AFTRA, who they tried to do, or like the producers tried to do some strike splitting in the middle of the early parts of the strike, trying to pit the actors against the writers, and it just wasn't working at all. So now that the writers have a tentative deal, what's it looking like for SAG-AFTRA? Is that moving anywhere? And then if you have any info on IATSE as well, because I think we're starting to lose some of that part as well. And we got to remember it's a big tent of folks in Hollywood making it all work rather.
It is, but IATSE next year. So a lot of what SAG is about to achieve, what we've achieved, and I would say what the DGA has achieved, although I would argue that their fight was less intense. But, they have their reasons and we support them. So I think the IATSE deal will benefit from what we're about to achieve, as I just said. So anyway, point being, we tried fervently in negotiation to maintain the right to respect picket lines for our fellow sister unions. And I don't think the buyers budged on that. So it's going to be a question of, who wants to go back to work or not. Luckily, I think the AMPTP is going to make that non-starter for all of us by closing a deal with SAG quickly. So SAG, much like us, had not heard back from the AMPTP for all of summer practically, since they went on strike July 14th. And we now know today that they are meeting for the first time on Monday, this upcoming Monday. And what's interesting is that just a little small detail, SAG had asked to meet in a new arena of negotiation as opposed to the AMPTP headquarters. And it was just revealed that the WGA deal itself was brokered in our headquarters and not the AMPTP's. So that's interesting that they're calling them the Gang of Four. Disney's Bob Iger, Donna Langley from Universal, David Zaslav from Warner Brothers, and Ted Sarandos from Netflix. They're the ones really representing the AMPTP at this stage. So it looks like if they begin talking Monday, I don't want to take anything for granted, but DGA to a lesser extent and the WGA have now given a strong starting point for SAG to begin their negotiations, where I feel this is just my personal opinion, Evan Almighty's personal opinion, I think their deal probably closes within a week. Let's say they do another marathon 5 days in a row, which is a lot to ask, but if they could do that next week and then present something to ratify in a matter of weeks, we could see the end of the strikes officially by the end of October. But that only gets done if WGA continues to support as much as we can, including on the picket line, which, I'll be at Paramount tomorrow. We have new boards going up of WGA support SAG, and, we've been striking all summer. What's a few more days, what it takes.
Yeah, and you were just describing with SAG-AFTRA, they were starting their strike in mid-July. Now they're doing negotiations in early October. So this could be, it'd be really nice to see it kind of come down to one deal begets another deal, and it creates a standard for what workers on all sides can expect, or at least, start to expect.
Industry-wide. Yeah, exactly. And not just in our industry. I think what's happening, I've been telling people this for years, or at least the last few years, and I might have even told you this before too, but we're living in the 1920s all over again. And this might sound familiar, but there's labor movements, there's international bank crises. We're in World War III right now. When you have Kim Jong-un traveling to Russia to provide weapons to them to continue their war, call it what you will, whatever degree, it is a world conflict.
Yeah, people are
right?
calling it a new Cold War. Like there's a lot of sentiment. People are feeling like it's connected.
Yeah, there's less degree to it, and there's been a lot of people killed, which is horrible. I'm getting a little off topic. What I'm saying is people are realizing, from the executive to the man on the street, that the quality of life has been crushed so low in this country. And I'm saying, as somebody who spent time recently in France looking at a country that has benefited a lot from striking in its healthcare system, work hours, etc., people are waking up, especially in the United States, but in other countries as well too, that that they are deserve more for their labor and to be treated in a matter of dignity that allows them to pursue a life of self-fulfillment. So time's here. Let's pay the piper.
Yeah. What are some of the protections for AI that writers can look to
Yeah,
expect? And do you think that it's something that can be emulated elsewhere, as the AI evangelists say, oh, just give it 5 years, it's going to come for everyone's jobs?
yeah, exactly. So let's talk about that. And then to the same point, whatever we achieve in our language, which we've already achieved, and I'll get into, I fear will be contested or made different by this new super committee of Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Bill Gates who are meeting at the White House to discuss AI.
The
And that's a whole other
AIPTP.
conversation about why. I know. See, I agree. I agree. So what happened here is, as you mentioned earlier, very astutely, is that there was no AI protection before in our contract. This is the first time we've had negotiations centered around it, and it's not just our industry. I mean, grocery stores are affected by automation. The auto workers are affected by automation. I myself call myself a child of Star Trek. I believe that if there is a way to automate everything that costs money to produce, do it so you can save costs, but then also pass those savings on to the people who would then buy your product, so that it's an equal harmony of robot labor and then humans who enjoy and benefit from it. I think that's the best way to make a society. But anyway, okay. So AI in this instance comes down to the fact, this is the main sticking or the most important point of interest on AI, is that it is not copyrightable. The US Copyright Office does not recognize AI generated or generative AI created material. So the studios know and acknowledge that the way to make that material copyrightable, meaning that if their computer created the new Terminator, if they didn't have a human touch it with a rewrite or put some sort of twist on it to make it therefore copyrightable, without that, any other studio could steal their IP. And you know how all the studios have created 40-foot high walls around their IP to make sure that Mickey Mouse appearing in with Bugs Bunny in Roger Rabbit, if anybody remembers that movie, was like people losing their minds that like studios were working together. So in order to keep studios in line, they have to benefit from the AI, but they still need a SAP human like us to come in and say, okay, we'll do it and sign a deal. So at least right now, human involvement is required for AI use in our studio system. It goes further than that. Writers now have the right to incorporate AI or generative AI as a writing tool that will benefit their work with the permission of the producer. So the producers can allow it. The producers are not allowed to require it. So it's still the writer's choice on what they use with it. And we'll see what SAT comes up with, because a lot of their AI grief, we'll call it, will be centered around the use of likeness. But it's the same thing. It's whatever is unique to us as a creator needs to be protected. So we'll see what advancements they make. But it's surprisingly in line for a new technology. But the fact that the studios would not move off of certain elements prove that they fully intend to incorporate it, if not so already. So at least this gives the ability for us to kind of guide how it's used for now. As you said a moment ago, we'll see how it goes in 5 years.
Yeah, I can imagine that, as with all deals, as with the deal before, it was good, not, everything in the world, and definitely there's room for improvement, and the world will change and the economics will change, which will beget a change to it. But I find it very promising to see the note that says that the guild reserves the right to assert that exploitation of a writer's material to train AI is prohibited. So the idea that these studios would just train AI behind the scenes on writers that have already worked for them and then use that work to basically put them out of business in the future, that's pretty much explicitly prohibited. And if the guild has any sort of suspicion of that, they can, pursue any sort of avenues that make sense.
Yeah, exactly. It has some teeth. That said, I can't say that there won't be studio executives behind the scenes feeding a bunch of scripts into ChatGPT to create the technology anyway, much like how the utility system in California would rather just pay legal fees for all the wildfires caused by ancient technology. I think the studios probably see it the same way, like create an AI replacement and deal with whatever litigation comes out of it. That said, we know what projects look like that come out of executives' hands only without the use of creatives. So maybe come and give it a try.
Oh, but surely AI will
now,
make it better. Big sarcasm.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get into it. I won't say the next bit, but that's good. It's a great way to start to wrangle what AI is. And keep in mind, the DGA has language in it that makes its contract adaptable to what we are able to gain. Same for SAG-AFTRA and vice versa. So, as I said, I hope that SAG can use the basis of our two agreements right now and their simultaneous agreement. And let's not forget that they also have voted overwhelmingly to approve a strike against the video game industry. They were previously on strike against video games in 2017 for about 6 months, and video games have only grown in the last 6 years. I know many writers making a career only writing video games. I myself play video games and an elite. If you want to look up Bruce Wayne 2049 on Xbox, we can play. But this applies to that as well, to that fight in the video game industry, which itself is, there are video games that bring in more than Marvel movies do in their entire run sometimes in their opening weekend, which we'll talk about later. So I think those are probably the big points. We can get into the minutia about other stuff, but as I said, across the board, there's improvements that we would not have gotten without the strike, improvements that were worth the strike. And remember, this negotiations happen every 3 years. So if they want to make a strike, we will. But people have to realize, industry-wide, countrywide, international-wide, that really the only way to fight corporate greed or to get what you want is to withhold your labor. And that comes down to, even if they are able to perfect automation across the board, there'll still be a way to make an infrastructure that lets human beings benefit from it. And this is part of the reason why we did this fight.
Major workers of the world unite stuff right there. You were gonna mention some other parts of the deal, like any other highlights you want to share, and also any things where you're feeling like, folks maybe feel like, even with this deal, we really wish we could have gotten some more ironclad clauses on this, that, or the other thing. Just other stuff you want to flag for us.
About those. Yeah. So we spoke about TV earlier. Let's talk about feature writers. So I primarily am a feature writer. I do work in TV as well, but features were how I broke in and made, my quick success and still, pay the bills. So a big problem that Hollywood has across the board is how long it takes to get paid. Like, for example, the very first script I ever sold was a R-rated high school comedy, musical comedy with Jaden Smith that Will was producing when he had his deal at Sony. So I sold that December, and I got my contract to sign, my first payment, July the following year. So it took 7 months to even get commenced, and then after that, probably 6 months of work and chasing your paycheck. So the problem is, fundamentally, the payment system in Hollywood is super slow. So one of the major achievements we've made on the feature side this time is that however many steps you're being paid for, and a step refers to this first draft is a step, doing a rewrite is a step, doing a second rewrite is a step, doing a polish on the rewrite is a step. So we have only historically had guaranteed one-step deals, meaning that if they like your original script, they'll buy it, but they don't have to pay you to rewrite it. They don't have to pay you to rewrite it again or polish it, which is, those steps are how you make a lot of money, right? So now we have, for the first time ever, the guaranteed second step. And the union has been fighting for that for something like 40 years, meaning that they guarantee to buy your script and they guarantee to pay you for the work, because many times they would buy the script and be like, hey, if you want us to produce this, you better do 10 rounds of writing for free, which I've done for studio level producers in the beginning of my career. Now you get guaranteed 2 steps. More importantly, perhaps, is that it used to be that the steps would be different percentages of your overall compensation. So your first step is 25. Typically, sometimes it's 50, which is what it's enumerated in the contract now. All my deals have been 50% upon compensation, but maybe it's just because we negotiate well. But now in the agreement, you get your 50% compensation, and then no matter what happens from commencement from 9 weeks out of commencement, you get your next 25%. Because there are and then you get another 25% when you deliver. So that we've created a step that pays you in between getting started and when you deliver it. So that helps people float, because a lot of times you'll have people get paid on commencement, and then let's say the producer says, I want to give you some notes before you get started, or like it's a soft commencement. You could be sitting around 3-4 months saying, can I start and get paid? So now that's huge that we don't have future writers sitting around, waiting for that phone call to see where their checks are, as opposed to TV writers who get paid weekly.
That is just another game-changing part of it as well. And I'm surprised that, I'm not surprised that these studios are that greedy and like they'll try to do this other process. I'm just I guess surprised that only getting them to like 2 steps. So it seems like there's still room for them to be like, okay, there's still not a third step or a fourth step, even though that's actually in the work. Absolutely. But even like a beginning and a midpoint, it's a step in, no pun intended, in the right direction. So that's definitely.
Yeah. And I can tell you how many loopholes there are, though. I know writers who will have clauses placed in between their commencement and their first step that are just, you don't even notice that it says like miniature polish or whatever the language is, depending on how, and you'll have to do an entire rewrite for like $2,000. So there are definitely loopholes. You asked, were there any things that we want to improve upon? I mean, obviously the answer is yes to everything. We always want more, 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 because we put blood, sweat, and tears into this, and I still call this the foundation of Hollywood. Without writers, I think there's nothing. But
And
anyway,
and just for the record, workers just deserve like everything. Just everything. Period. This is my
right. I mean, look, if you can charge. I was in France. I just paid $19 American for one fish fillet, one cheeseburger, one fry. Don't judge me. It's the same total that you would pay here in the United States. It was off by like $1, but it's like almost $20 for. Okay, if you can charge that much for the food, you can pay the person making it even more. Come on, that's crazy. You could sell one extra filet of fish an hour. You've doubled everybody's hourly wage. Well, per filet of fish.
We'll get into it. I really fast on France. I've just been seeing videos of how they respond to police brutality protests. And they're like knocking in the windows of police cars and like all mobbing together. Stuff that they say stuff they say about brown people in America.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Again, it's the many people on either side of the political spectrum have had it with the machine. The establishment of whether that's authority or government, and there's reasons for, reasons why, whatever. But as far as improvement, there's nothing really I don't want to end up criticizing the deal. I mean, it's like I said, it's improved in every single category, and it's the greatest deal numerically in history we've ever gotten. For example, the beginning of this negotiation, the AMPTP offered is something like $83 million total compensation per year, and what we've closed at is $233 million compensation per year. So that's what, 3 times over, it's practically 9 intervals of, we'll do the math later, but no, we love the deal. And more importantly, it's created and helped reinforce the foundation that SAG will use, that we'll use next time, that the other unions will use. And the lesson to be learned here is that you keep solidarity. I mean, it was a hot summer. We had to reduce hours because of heat stroke. There was people driving too close and throwing things at the picketers, and you had Universal tearing up the sidewalk and making it dangerous for people to even be there. All that bullshit aside, we withheld our labor until we were presented a group willing to work with us to achieve what we are saying is and proving is to be historically the greatest deal ever negotiated by a labor union in Hollywood.
And what do we say? Bullying works. It's a great outcome for the Writers Guild in this case, and yeah, I definitely hope to see it throughout all of Hollywood and then throughout all the other industries that are striking as well. I mean, yeah, UPS got a great deal out of it. So good of a deal that my conservative banker friends were like joke memeing about, oh, you know what, I should quit private equity investment and go drive a truck for UPS. Why not? Like,
they should.
And like, you know what? We one at a time.
Yeah. I'll allow that.
No, that's awesome. Again, thank you, Evan, so much for breaking this down for us, for giving us this inside information, this details about what the Writers Guild is working on and what's going on in Hollywood in general. And yeah, we'll have to do this again sometime.
Okay, absolutely. Anytime, Dan, from the internet. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm back whenever you want.
Appreciate it. Thank you for checking this out. I should be making more videos like these because YouTube puts all of my live streams in a different tab, so it looks like I haven't uploaded a video in a while, but in reality, I've just been doing Power Report Live, where we live stream on YouTube and Twitch. 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, most Thursdays. I get a panel of folks together. Sometimes I go solo. Oftentimes I'm with the Power Report crew, Bam, C's, Sean. There's other great guests from the left that are on. I get interviews from time to time. Sometimes I'm on Leftist Mafia and I co-stream with that. Sometimes we're live streaming debates. It's a really fun time. So check it out at youtube.com/danfromtheinternet or twitch.tv/danfromtheweb. And we're slowly monetizing, so if you send a super chat or you become a subscriber, that is also appreciated as well. Cheers!